The last part of my book, I end with young veterans' attempts to return to the rhythms of civilian life, frankly, finding the social and economic deck stacked against them. The promises and expectations from the war proved viciously false. Some feared they had wasted the best years of their lives. "My dear Ben," writes William North to his friend and fellow aide-de-camp to the Baron Steuben, "Dear Ben, I walked into town this evening and walked out again. I wish I had been in hell before I entered the Army. It has given me passions I can never gratify and ideas which will make my life miserable in future." He was probably a bit drunk. The handwriting is not usual aide-de-camp handwriting, let's just say. "I am determined to go to Virginia, to Carolina, to marry, to kill myself, to go into business, to do nothing. Money is my panic. I'm miserable. It's the lot of man to be useless. Why should I murmur?" After an exciting military career as an aide to a baron, drafting letters to aristocratic French generals, gliding through the cream of American society, where could William North go but down at the end of the war? At least immediately. Would young officers and soldiers simply return to their father's farms, work as a clerk in another man's shop, study law under some other professor, take a paltry wage as a hewer of wood or a drawer of water? Interestingly, they get back on track by helping each other, maintaining their Army relationships as best they could, particularly in the first years after the war, as they scatter to cities or to new farms on northern and western frontiers. Ultimately, long service in the Revolution failed to answer young men's expectations. They had sought competence and independence, regard from their communities. Instead, most had wasted their strength, their health, and their time. In a republic that proclaimed the equality of white men, Continental veterans measurably and increasingly fell behind their peers as years passed, perhaps burdened by physical or psychological wounds, or the fact that they had spent, on average, 3 years not making any money at a time when they really needed to be making some money. This stagnation and decline was tragic because their endurance had helped win independence, had established the citizen and the consent of the governed and we the people as the source of political sovereignty in this new republic. Yet, the youths of the Continental Army generally fell short in cementing their position as men of some consequence and achieving the goals of the life course, so conservative and traditional. To conclude, how does seeing young men as soldiers change our understanding of the Revolution? After the war, the American elite worried. The people have been taught a dangerous truth that all power is derived from them. And the lower ranks of society, the lower ranks, where almost all veterans returned, had seen that their leaders had feet of clay. With the exception of Washington, had not all fallen short? Benedict Arnold, traitor. Congress, incompetent. States, neglectful. Across the new nation, their betters demanded obedience and deference, but the war had broken that order. Political turmoil and armed rebellions continued across the 1790s as the Americans struggled to define their republic. Yet, the revolution does not tear itself apart. Credit usually goes to the political elite for this successful founding. Fortune certainly smiled on their unusually functional mix of paranoia, wisdom, and luck. But the young men of the army also play a role in steadying the Republic, because the goals of young soldiers were so traditional, so profoundly shaped by the drive to reach that next stage of their life, to earn the regard of their fellow men. Their goals proved to have limited power to disrupt the new politics. They proved neither radical nor reactionary. Rather, they accepted the order that they had fought to establish. The rhetoric of the revolution and the experiences of the war forged stronger links between manhood, soldiering, and citizenship. It assured them that they had an honorable place in a republic as citizens. They had taken up arms in an intensely political and shared struggle, but their ultimate goals were private and individual and could only be fulfilled by steady effort and the passage of time. That so many veterans would ultimately fail to gain or keep their independence would prove tragic, but not radicalizing. The soldierly identity that would have encouraged them to band together, find their Caesar, rise up, and overthrow, that identity had been laid aside. Ironically, this meant that the traditional Republican fear of standing armies was fundamentally misplaced. These young men of the army were never a threat to the revolution. They had become soldiers in pursuit of personal independence, and they knew their individual destinies. Their destinies were inextricably bound up with the Republic. And for that reason, like Cincinnatus, they had laid down their arms and returned to their plows. Thank you.
Thank you very much.